Star Wars Maul Shadow Lord is the animated Maul story we've all been waiting for, and there's only one man to talk to about it, Sam Witwer. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
There is a ton going on in the galaxy far, far away when Maul Shadow Lord picks up. Could you tell our audience a little bit about what is happening with Maul on Janix?
Well, Janix is a place that is perfect for Maul to get back on his feet after the war is over. The Empire isn't there yet. It's just, it's a place where you can kind of take your time, lick your wounds, and there's some opportunity there. He's anxious to not draw too much attention to himself, but the trick there is that at the end of the Clone War, there was a whole plan for the Shadow Collective where everyone was going to insulate themselves against the changeover from Republic to Galactic Empire. And no one really knew what that meant. No one really knew what the Galactic Empire was going to be. Even Maul, who was one of the architects of that for a while, didn't know that this was how it was going to play out. Well, everyone got so freaked out by the change that people scattered, people fractured, and the people that were supposed to be there for Maul absconded with spaceships and money and kind of put him in a bad position. So Maul has to simultaneously keep a low profile on Janix, while at the same time make a very, at least in underworld terms, a public spectacle of those who wronged him. Because if he can let any of these guys get away with it, he will have no credibility. So he's got to reestablish himself as the boogeyman, as Kaiser Sose,
One of the things that I appreciate most about the show so far is it feels like, for animated Star Wars, one of the most ground level and focused attempts at storytelling that I've seen.
Yeah, it feels like it lives in the 70s in terms of like French Connection or something.
It's a much more character-driven thing than we've really seen these shows attempt.
Yeah, and even the look of it helps with that, because those movies that we all loved growing up with, the Scorsese, De Palma movies, all of that stuff had so much film grain. There was like a substrate that you saw these images projected through, and that created the images. So Joel Aaron and his team, we also have a physical substrate that we tell our story visually through, and it's these paintbrush strokes. So the entire show feels very physical, because in fact it is. Those paintbrush strokes that they've incorporated into the show were physical. They actually created the strokes with chunky paint and did all this stuff and figured out a way to incorporate that and paint it onto the imagery.
Wow.
I don't know if the sort of filmic consequences of that were why they did it, but that's what it feels like to me. I mean, like, even The Empire Strikes Back, everything, that whole movie feels like a painting. And part of that is
iconic matte paintings ever in film.
Right, exactly. Some of the reality that we were living with in the original Star Wars trilogies were these extraordinary matte paintings, which went really, really well with the film grain of the time and the way that it was shot. When I watch Shadow Lord, I'm like, this really, again, we're not quite using the same type of film grain, but we are using the chunky brush strokes. We have beautiful matte paintings, and we even have hidden in there some practical photography. I almost don't want to tell you where, but it's in there, and because it's incorporated in the way that they have done it, it just melds right in. You almost can't tell how we achieved certain illusions.
I mean, that's so in the spirit of Star Wars too. Yeah. I mean, like, Star Wars is especially the original trilogy, is just this collection of trickery, visual trickery and magic.
Whatever
light and magic, some might say.
Precisely. Yeah. It's like, we need the shot. How do we do it?
Yeah.
It's that simple.
And it's nice to see that carried forward into Maul Shadow Lord.
It's we're missing a spaceship, and Joel Aaron goes, well, let me go whip one up in my garage and we'll shoot it.
Anything to get the job done, right?
Surely. Yeah, that's the wonderful thing about this stuff is we have such an extraordinary, inventive team under Brad Rao, who is, his leadership skills are second to none. He is, I like to call him the calm in the storm. The waves are crashing and all kinds of stuff, and then you just see this sailboat just chilling in the middle of all the waves, and he's just like, hey guys, everything's fine. And then, of course, over the entire proceeding is the Emperor Dave Filoni, who created this show and had a very, very strong vision of what this should be. And so that's yet another layer of safety you have there, because he could come in I mean, every time that he would touch our cuts or play around with things, the improvements were thrilling. I mean, just because he knew, oh, I see what you're doing, but what I really want is this, and then he would, we would redo something, and it just ended up being thrilling, like an extraordinary collaboration where we felt like we were experimenting, which again goes back to the spirit of these filmmakers in the 70s.
Yeah.
George Lucas and them were always experimenting. They thought of themselves as experimental filmmakers, and it's kind of the environment that Dave set up for us. We've been trying things.
Well, it's so interesting for Star Wars because obviously when we think about Star Wars, we think about spectacle, we think about this massive stories, battles of good and evil. Maul Shadow Lord, though, it's so refreshingly more focused on like very character goal-driven stakes.
Yeah.
Maul is trying to build up the Shadow Collective on Janix. You talk about all these leaders you have on the show. Maul is leading a group of his own, which is a very interesting position to see.
Yes, it is.
What kind of leader do you feel like Maul is?
Oh, he's excellent. He's very kind. He listens. He's not kind.
No, not so much.
No. What's interesting is that it has at least occurred to him that dealing with people where they live and connecting with them on some way could be used to his advantage. Yeah. But what kind of a leader is he? Oh, he doesn't really tolerate failure. If you cross him, you're gone, you're dead. He does have his own, I don't want to say a code of ethics, but he has his own rules. It's very clear to me what he will and will not do. And it's a bit different than Palpatine's, but it's informed by Palpatine because Darth Sidious raised him. So he can't help but, in a way, be his father's son. Not his actual father, but his father figure. Obviously, he had an army before. That got whittled down to nothing by the end of the war. We saw a good deal of that in the Clone Wars. His army got, vaporized. But the crew he has, these are the most loyal, these are the most fanatical, these are the most talented. So his crew is extremely effective. It's small, but it's effective. Yeah, it's interesting. He's got a couple of Zabraks that hang out with him, Scorn and Icarus, and they may evoke the memory of another Zabrak that he used to hang out around with. And there's an implication there that he's found these two gentlemen that remind us of another famous Star Wars character, played by Clancy Brown.
Yes.
Brother, I am an unworthy apprentice.
Maul is a character that you've obviously been really deeply connected to for a long time now. I'm curious to know, as somebody that grew up in the prequel era and has also very much had Darth Maul a part of his life for a long time, what are the perceptions or ideas of that character that you find yourself most sensitive to or like wanting to jump to the defense of?
Well, but people, that's the thing. People's perceptions in Star Wars are very important if you're an audience member, because it really is a mythology that depends on people owning it. Yeah. It depends on people taking it home and deciding for themselves what it all means. So I don't find myself feeling the need to correct anyone in terms of anything that they feel or think about Maul. It's really once we create the show, it's theirs. So you tell me what Maul is all about. I mean, I know how I play him. I know what I think is going on with him. The fun about talking about it in this sense is nothing we've talked about, I think, spoils anything. The show speaks for itself, but the backstory of the show, that is fun to cue up the things that I know happen in the show because the backstory is extensive. I mean, we had all these talks about this or that or ideas. And Dave said to me at one point, one of the challenges is that we don't want to lose the mystique of the character, that there is a certain mystery about Maul. So you say, well, then how do you do a show about him? And the answer is, well, behavior. Yeah. There's nothing stopping us from dramatizing certain behavioral traits that would cause an audience member to say, I think he reacted that way because of this, or I think his childhood was because it was like this or like that, or I think this happened that he behaves in this way. That's kind of more fun than to spell out all of the details that say, I think I know, because what do I know?
Well, another aspect of this character that I find pretty interesting is the fact that there are characters in Star Wars where we know they have sort of a fixed end point. So for you, I want to know, how it feels to be telling stories about Maul, even though he has that sort of plot armor. Like, how is that still gratifying for you?
Well, because, you know, even if you know what happens, what you don't know is how did it happen? Why did it happen? And how did it make the characters feel? That's where the drama is. And I think it's something that we've probably all learned through osmosis through the process of George making the prequels, because the specifics are actually quite interesting.
Yeah.
They're actually quite dramatic. And in the case of Maul, yeah, we have this endpoint for him. But we've never charted the course from the Clone Wars Maul all the way to the Rebels Maul. Yeah. There's like a good 15 or more years that we don't know about. Maul in Rebels always felt to me like a kind of a sad old man who was at the end of his rope and had no place to go. And you notice that he does not put together a power base, as we saw him do on several occasions earlier. Right. He does not involve too many people. He tries to get Ezra involved, obviously. Kanan's involved. Sorry, Freddie. But he doesn't really, he doesn't build up a group of people or a power base. He certainly could. He knows how to do that. He was trained to do that. But he doesn't. I've always thought that was fascinating. Like, he is so isolated and so lonely in this, you know? Also, when Ezra rebukes him on Dathomir, he doesn't kill him instantly. The Emperor would have.
Yeah.
The Emperor would have struck him down immediately after some Force of Lightning.
Yeah,
but, you know, Maul he reaches out to Ezra. He says, we could have been brothers. Ezra rebukes him. And then he comes to a point where after that, he has an emotional outburst. He eventually laughs and just goes, Ezra Bridger, and then leaves. And whether he thinks he's going to get Ezra back later or not is irrelevant. What happened right there? What was that about? That's not a very Sith thing that he did right there. So what's interesting is, yes, he's a bad guy in Rebels, but certainly something happened that changed him quite a bit. That changed him into a person who wouldn't scream at his death. Because what happens when the Emperor gets thrown into the, you know, down the shaft?
Excellent blood curdling.
Yeah, he's like losing his mind. And it's rage and it's fear and it's all those things, and he's not happy and he's not having it, and it doesn't matter, he explodes at the bottom. Maul doesn't do that. When the lightsaber hits Maul, he goes, oh, thank God. You're like, whoa, that's a change. Early Maul would have screamed bloody murder. He wouldn't have taken it. Late Maul goes, oh, good. Jedi Master, thank you, you know? So how do we get there? And so when you have an endpoint like that, you got a lot of questions, and you have a course to chart, but you know where you're headed, and that helps an actor and helps writers and helps everyone to create a very interesting course to get there, which is never a straight line. You always got to make a really cool path to get there.
To fight as allies.
The Empire may be our common enemy, but Maul will never be our ally.
Do you have a favorite of all time video game execution of Darth Maul?
Video game execution of Darth Maul. Well, the recent Battlefront was pretty great.
See, I think that might be mine too.
Yeah.
You hit that flow motion state. Oh my God, you're ripping around.
Right.
They got like 15 stormtroopers at once.
And there's something about that, right? Like when you were having a good night.
Yeah.
Because there were times where I would get the character, and at one point I got accused by a very angry player of farming Maul. I didn't know how to tell him.
You've farmed the most Maul.
Farming Maul, man. You keep farming Maul. And I'm like, well, I feel weirdly justified. What I liked about that, the way they created that, is that if you were really focused one night, the Force was with you and you could not be stopped. Yeah. But then if you didn't have that focus, things fell apart pretty quick. You spent all this time building up the points. You get the hero character and you get killed right away.
Yeah. Oh, there's nothing worse than that. Of course, another very famous Star Wars character you were tied to forever is Starkiller.
Starkiller, yeah.
I'm going to give you a little out here on this question, though. Other than Starkiller, who is one Star Wars video game character that you would like to see come into either live action or animated form?
Oh my God. Well, Kyle Katarn definitely comes to mind.
What are you doing, Kyle?
Don't try to talk me out of this, Father.
Come on.
I mean, they brought his gun back in Andor. I thought that was cool. He's done a lot for us, and Be nice to see him return in some way, shape, or form, because he was formative for us.
Yeah, very, very formative, and also seems to fit very well into, where the sequel trilogy goes of rebuilding the Jedi Order. It's like, that's what he's around for.
Right. Vanessa played Jan Ors in Jedi Outcast. Vanessa Marshall, who is Rook cast in our show.
Star Wars video game royalty.
Yeah, we're so lucky to have her. She's fantastic. Yeah, those games, I go all the way back to being thrilled that I could fight AT-AT walkers in Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back cartridge for the Atari 2600.
Yep.
That was incredible.
Well, hey, while I've got you here, Sam, I think I've told you this before. I'm IGN's resident Stephen King nerd. You are in one of my very favorite Stephen King movies ever, The Mist.
There were other dimensions, other worlds.
We've heard recently Mike Flanagan is going to be writing and directing a new adaptation of that. I want to know for you what you want to see out of that, because it's a movie that's beloved, but I feel like there might be room to do some different stuff as well. So I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
Right. Well, my character was a Darabont creation for that. So my character doesn't really appear in the novella. There's hints of my character, but not really as a character. I love Flanagan's stuff. I'm a huge fan of the extended version of Dr. Sleep.
Me too. I champion that any chance.
Yes.
Watch the movie, but watch the extended cut.
You have to, because the theatrical, it's fine.
It's not the full thing.
Yeah, the extended, you're in a world.
Yes.
It creates a world for you, and not to mention the fact that it was so great to see all these actors kind of nail the characters. Not so much the actors of The Shining, but the characters. I remember, you go to the
Carl Lumbly as Dick Halloran's
so
one of
great.
the most incredible things I've ever seen in a movie.
So great. And who was the actor who played the Shelley Duvall character?
Her name is Alex Esso, I believe.
She was terrific.
Yeah.
She was terrific. So much so that her vocally, she was evoking Shelley Duvall.
That story. Daddy!
Oh my God, so good.
And then Henry Thomas at the end as Jack Torrance as well.
That
what a performance.
Blew my mind. I was doing a Saturn Awards not too long ago, and I didn't have a chance to tell him how impressed I was. He was presenting something, and I was presenting something, and I was like, oh damn it, because you're watching the film, and this is a little spoiler. We don't mean.
We can talk about it. No.
Right,
we can spoil Dr. Sleep. It's been if you haven't seen Dr. Sleep, it's your fault, not ours.
Yeah, right. You're getting to a point where it's starting to become inevitable that Jack Torrance has to show up, and I'm sitting there going, oh no, because you're doing so great. You can't. This is not. How are you going to do this? And then they showed up and they play at least the beginning of the scene in profile.
Mm-hmm. They're copying the coverage from that shot in the Kubrick movie.
Right.
That dead on, him at the bar, Lloyd at the bar.
And you're seeing a silhouette that is the Jack Nicholson silhouette, but that's not Jack Nicholson. And he's not really talking like Jack Nicholson, but it's Jack Torrance.
He's talking like Jack Torrance.
He's talking like Jack Torrance, which is easy to say, impossible to do.
She was your wife. I think you've mistaken me for someone else.
And I'm sitting there, and I was just like, what is going on? That's Jack Torrance. Oh my God. And then when you finally got to look at him, I'm like, it's Jack Torrance, it's Henry Thomas.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? I've always, every time I've seen that guy's work, I'm always really impressed. But he swept me away in Jack Torrance land, succeeding at a feat that I thought was impossible. And only after watching him and being transfixed by this performance for I don't know how long did I realize it was him. And that's an actor right there. That's a guy who can pull some stuff off. I was so impressed.
It's the movie, performing a victory lap at that point, because it's the moment where the Kubrick shining of it all, the King shining of it all, which is what Dr. Sleep is really trying to resolve.
Yeah, exactly.
It all really comes together in that scene, because it's also Danny getting over his that's where he makes the choice to really put the drink down and be like, I'm not going to be you.
What a terrific scene. And also how Jack Torrance advocates for himself and what his point of view is. Was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Very uncomfortable. Because, for a long time with The Shining, I always thought when I was younger and learning about storytelling we all have our opinions, right? And I certainly was like, well, the problem here is that, I love this movie. Don't get me wrong. This is me like at 16 or 20 or 25 or whatever, being like, I love the movie, but don't you think that he just seems so sinister, and shouldn't it be a nice guy that turns into a bad guy? And shouldn't it be? And sure, you could do that. You could have a decent family man who was then turned into something grotesque. But that's not what happens in The Shining, the movie. What happens in The Shining, the movie is this is a guy who doesn't want to be married with a kid. And that's terrifying, because I think any parent probably has their moments where they're like, why did I do this? I'm so tired. I just want to have something for myself. As you say, I just want something for myself, So when you watch The Shining, this is a guy who, probably loves his wife and his kid, but is just so desperate to also, he shouldn't have been a father. So it's almost as if this guy was solid, the hotel would have nothing to grip onto. But because he wasn't solid, because he was struggling, because he didn't have a satisfying career, he didn't feel like he was achieving what he wanted to achieve in his life, he felt like his wife and his child were a drag on those ambitions. The hotel had plenty to lock into to turn him into the worst version of himself. And that's what you got from the Henry Thomas performance. Yeah. And made explicit. He talks about it. He literally explains his alcoholism. And by the way, here's something else about The Shining because I just saw it in the theater, and it was disturbing. It was such a disturbing revelation. Shelley Duvall explains, because, the kid had the
arm break.
The arm break. Yeah. And she goes, and, how long ago was it? And she doesn't ask how long ago it was. She goes, so his shoulder was dislocated. Yeah. And, but something did come of it, because he said, Wendy, I'm never touching a drop again. And if I do, you can leave me. And, that's what he said. And he's been sober for 9 months or so. She said something like that.
It's such
9 months.
A short amount of time.
That's disturbing.
The volatility is already there.
Right.
We're going into.
I think she said 9 months. She might have said 7. She might have said 9 months.
It's a short amount of time.
Yeah, he hasn't had any alcohol in 5 months.
Here's the scary thing that I'd never picked up in The Shining. He's talking to Lloyd, Jack Torrance. And he goes, I love him. I would never hurt him. Okay, there was that one time. And we're, as the audience, we're like, yeah, we know.
A couple pounds per square inch of extra force.
Extra force, just a momentary loss of muscular coordination. And then he says something, and it hit me like a lightning bolt. He goes, it was 3 goddamn years ago.
It was 3 goddamn years ago.
And you go, she's not talking about the first time. This happened more than once. He hurt the kid more than once. This was not a one-time thing.
Yeah.
There was one event 3 years ago that he's thinking about, and then there was an event that she's thinking about. This isn't the same event.
It's almost like how
That's scary.
It could almost be like that movie is of course famous for having the hotel have a bunch of geography and a layout that makes no sense. Mm-hmm. And it almost filters into the narrative of the movie, where it's just like all these misconceptions that these characters have about their own lives and reality are just crashing into each other.
There's a lot in common between Jack Torrance and Darth Maul. Quite honestly, there is. The thing that I always think about when it comes to this stuff is that there is a gulf between intention and action. And sometimes that gulf is so wide between intention and action, it's the difference between good and evil. Yeah. And so that is one of the keys of this character, is that he may have a certain intent, but how does that intent play out through action? Yeah. How does a good intent become an evil action? That type of thing. I think it's a fascinating thing, and I think it's how we make this a Star Wars show, because Star Wars is an inherently moral mythology. Yeah. It's about being a good person. It's about learning from your mistakes. It's about being good to others, and that being a real substantive benefit. I get it. There's spaceships. There's all kinds of cool eye candy. But really what it is about is a battle within yourself, selfishness versus selflessness. And the more reflective you can be, the more you can shorten the gulf between intention and action and make it the same thing so that they're both consistent with each other. But when you don't reflect, when you don't take responsibility for your behavior and your actions, and when you start, at that point, you are unmoored. You can use your intellect to do the mental gymnastics to justify just about anything. And that's what Maul does, unfortunately. He can justify a lot. Having said that, he does have a code of behavior that he lives by. It's very consistent to him. Yeah. Because to him, that's how the world works. Jack Torrance, the Overlook Hotel is kind of his Star Wars galaxy. And there's, the intent is so far away from the action by the end of that film. You watch that gulf just grow as The Shining goes on.
I think us being able to talk about Stephen King and Star Wars in the same sentence is a very good place to leave off. So Sam, thank you so much for coming in today.
Right up.
Star Wars Maul Shadow Lord hits Disney Plus on April 6th. Do not miss it. And for everything else Star Wars, you're already in the right place. IGN.
I master the Force, and the Force serves me.